One benefit of having the Leica SL2-S is that the camera body can accept any M lens using this Leica M to L adapter. So I put on the 50mm Summilux f1.4 on my SL2-S, and I found that it was a refreshing, a new experience for both the camera and lens. It's still a manual lens, but combining it with the ergonomics of the SL2-S with its large hand grip, it makes the 50mm lens easier to handle on this camera. M lenses are more compact compared to SL lenses, so you can see the difference between the M lens and the 24-70 SL lens. Using this 50 on this SL2 is much easier to use for all-day use. So you get an excellent 50mm prime lens that goes up to f1.4 and is comfortable to use all day on this SL2 body. And once you snap it onto the camera, you get that extra benefit of focus magnification and focus peaking, which is especially helpful when shooting 1.4 on a longer lens. So before I go into the sample photos, I'll just quickly show how I set up my SL2-S. So there's a lot more function buttons that are customizable on the SL2-S. For the FN button, I use that for drive mode. I tried to keep this consistent with my other camera, the M11. I use that FN button to choose the self timer at 2 seconds. But the SL2-S doesn't separate out the self timer, and it only allows it to be selected with the drive mode. And then the small button near the external viewfinder, I use that to toggle between the different information screens as far as the menu, the grid lines, and the horizon line. Normally I like to keep it minimal with this view here. And then there's another small button here, which I use to toggle between video mode and photo mode. And the good thing about that is that all your settings are preserved when you're shooting from one mode to the other. And for the button right next to it, I use that for setting the ISO. And there's two small function buttons in the front, which are accessible with your first two fingers. And for the top one, I use that to engage the focus magnification. And for the bottom one, I use that to change the autofocus mode from either spot to field. I also wanted to mention this iPhone 14 Pro, which is an upgrade for me from the iPhone 12 mini. I got this one in white, and it really is a bright white compared to a silvery white in previous models. It has that always-on display and the dynamic island, and it has an upgraded camera to 48 megapixels. But what I really like about the camera is that it has the new action mode, which is shown up here. So if this is turned on, it smooths out the video, and it really stabilizes the shaky video, almost like a GoPro does. Here's an example of the action mode on the iPhone 14 Pro. I was walking pretty normally, except I was trying to keep quiet to get closer to them deer to take some photos. I think the stabilization works out pretty well, and I'm pretty satisfied with it so far. The resolution does crop down a little bit to enable the stabilization, so you don't get quite the 4K resolution. I was able to get up fairly close to this deer, but I didn't have a lot of time to get the focusing just right. And so this is a case where I think the focus magnification on the SL2-S helps, and the focus peaking. So I think getting focus on an M lens is slightly quicker and more accurate on the SL2S than it would be using a rangefinder with the focusing patch. Except, of course, if you're shooting stop down to f8 or f11, then pretty much everything will be in focus. I tried to get this deer to be silhouetted across the background of the sky. And here's a wider shot of a few more deer in the field. I was using a diffusion filter on my 50mm Summilux lens. It was a 1/8 strength, so I think you can see some of that effect, but it's not a particularly strong effect of the diffusion. So I did enjoy using the 50mm M lens on the SL2S. I felt like it just breathed in new life to the SL2S, and it was a different way of shooting with the M lens. But I think the SL2S would be especially helpful with my 75mm M lens. That lens is heavier and larger than the 50mm, so it's a little bit more cumbersome to handle on the M11, but I think it would be easier to handle with the SL2S. And shooting portraits with the 75mm is a little bit more tricky to get good focus with the rangefinder. So I think it would be a little bit easier to focus with the SL2S. Let me know in the comments what kind of M lenses you like to shoot on the SL2, and thanks for watching.